Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Curious About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Brian Rothenberg. Today, I wanted to give you another episode of What's on My Mind. There are two different topics I wanted to cover today. One will be pretty short, the other one shouldn't be too long either. I appreciate you tuning in for this one. So, first thing I wanted to do was give a small update with regard to some of the discussion that I had yesterday around what to do with my excess cash in my cash management account at Fidelity. And I had basically decided on wanting to put the money into MSTY, which is a synthetic long position in MicroStrategy with options that basically churns out dividend payments each month that are over 100% in dividend yield on an annual basis, perhaps with some NAV erosion. And so this morning, I got the bright idea to say, could I get more cute with what I'm doing with MSTY? As always, overthinking things and things like that. So I started to consider other products like IMST, which is another similar options based yield product that's available from Bitwise. Jeff Park runs that one, I believe. And also MST, which is another, again, options based derivative of MSTR, but one that has X leverage. I also looked at MSII, which has, I think, 1.25 leverage, again, using options. Ultimately, what I decided to do was to basically split my funds that I'm holding basically slightly longer term in cash equivalents in MSTY and IMST in equal parts. Basically, I'll have two, different that will come in at different times of the month. So it'll kind of mix things up a bit. And hopefully two different strategies that come through. Which one will play out better in the end? I think a lot of people think IMST will outperform, but it's only been around for a couple of months. I think it's only paid one dividend so far. MSTY has been around for over a year, still very short in terms of the history that we have to work with, but we'll kind of see. And for me, the big thing that I want to do is make more than 4% annually in yield, which is basically what I get in the money market if I just left the cash there, as well as kind of hopefully do better than I might do with just converting it to Bitcoin and paying, conversion fee and a spread coming and going every time I needed some money. So that's what I decided to do with that. Again, I spent, I don't know, an hour of headspace on it this morning. Well, I should have been kind of focused on a couple of other projects, which came due later in the day that I had to double down and work on. But I wanted to share that with you. The other thing that I did this afternoon was I joined my friend Blake, who is a logical Bitcoiner on X in X Spaces, and we discussed kind of allocation to MetaPlanet versus allocation to strategy, BTC yield, and sort of what the expectations are for the future. I know that Blake is considering his asset allocation, and I made some asset allocations earlier this week. And so we kind of discussed things and what metrics to use and things of that nature. I also brought up and posted in the group chat for that spaces this chart that I believe Roaring Ragnar on X posted, and I pulled over. I don't think he was on our X spaces. He certainly did not contribute anything verbally, but I found this really helpful. And one of the things that I really liked about this particular set of metrics is this one figure down here, sats per dollar of share price, right? How many actual sats do you get when you pay $1 into one of these companies? And I think that this must be a really, really important metric as we kind of consider what, days and months to cover MNAV are going to do to impact that, BTC yield percentages are going to do to impact that, and just trying to figure out what we're actually getting for $1, right? So I was trying to do the math earlier because I have DCA going every hour. And so, how many sats am I getting per dollar? And I think it's like 1,100 or something today based on where the price of Bitcoin is. So if I just put $1 into Bitcoin, I'm just going to get 1,100 sats, which is more than any single one of these companies. So why the hell would I invest in them? And it's really about what that yield's going to be over time, but hopefully in a way that the dollar that I put in today to one of these companies is going to be worth more than the dollar equivalent in Bitcoin in the future because you're going to accrete more sats to these dollars. And so, as we're looking at that, what do we do to compare these things? I mean, if you look at these numbers, sats per share, it's staggering the difference between MSTR and MetaPlanet. But you dig into that a little bit, okay, yeah, it's, 500,000 Bitcoin, it's 570,000 more than Metaplanet that strategy has. But one of the other really interesting metrics that I saw was the number of fully diluted shares outstanding. And I went back and I double checked this in Strategy's website. They have 312 million. Metaplanet on their website are reporting 600 million, but I think the fully diluted are probably 759, and that might be before today's news, which I'm not even going to talk about today in terms of Metaplanet's plans, just because it'll be a longer video than I want to do tonight. But these are really interesting pieces to look at. And what I tried to do while we were on the spaces is just run some of these numbers to say, okay, if we take and Blake, I think, put out the number of 30% BTC yield over the next year from now for strategy based on today's closing share price, and a 600% return BTC yield for Metaplanet. What would that be sats per share after 1 year? I actually started, whoops, let me go back, with a lower percentage, which I think is 300%. But somebody shared this kind of chart here where the BTC yield for the year is supposed to be 600%. I think, as we look to get to 30,000 sats, we could run the numbers as to what that would be from here. But I probably like the 300% kind of metric more, because I think that that's probably somewhat more realistic. But this is just how much it's going to, accrete if we have a BTC yield of 300%. Doesn't have anything to do with, the share prices or what the MNAVs are going to be to impact this. And that's where I really have to dig in a little bit deeper, I think, to better understand how all these pieces are going to interact with each other. And if we go back to Roaring Ragnar's chart there, BTC yield, days to cover MNAV, number of days between purchases, how big a supply are they buying out per day? None of these are unimportant factors, but some are certainly going to be more important than others. And certainly the sats per dollar of share price, where I put each dollar, I can get a lot more shares of Metaplanet for the same dollar than I can of strategy. But, I have to look at what those numbers are going to be. And so, for 5 shares of Metaplanet, I can probably get as many sats as I could get for strategy. And if they're going to grow those at 300% Bitcoin yield in terms of the number of sats, that looks like a no-brainer. And I think that's the argument that Blake was trying to make. But this evening, I did a couple of things, as I always do. I went to the gym and I worked out, and I'm listening to podcasts and videos while I'm doing that. One of the videos that I looked at was Quant Bros 2. So I haven't been back through all of these videos from the Quant Bros. I think I've seen 3 or 4 of them, and then all of the True North videos from the first video. But it just goes back, and I forget when this one was released, but it's more than a year ago, March 10th of 2024, so like 15 months ago. And I think that they referred to strategy trading at like 20 billion market cap at the time, so it's like 6x since then. And just all of the things that they're talking about for why they had conviction in the stock before the run up in 2024, before we are into all of the bullishness that we got with the Trump administration, everything else there. So first, thank you to Jeff and Ryan for putting these videos out there. And number 2, I'm glad that I watched it again tonight, because I don't have this sort of FOMO of I have to put every dollar best allocated into the winning strategy, meaning the winning Bitcoin Treasury company. And so I'm looking at this as, all right, I have money in strategy. I have money in Metaplanet. If I have new money, I have to decide where to put that. But I don't really want to take anything out of strategy or Metaplanet. Like if I own both of those in 20 years, I think I'm going to be pretty happy with what I put in there. I will probably own 10 or 20 other stocks by then, all of them Bitcoin Treasury companies, some of which may grow more quickly. And it's the homework and the lessons that we're going to learn here that are really going to pay dividends. But in the short term, and I told people this when I was at the Bitcoin conference last week, in the short term, I think that Metaplanet and probably the blockchain group and the smarter web company and even SMLR will potentially outperform strategy. Both Bitcoin yield and price metrics, which, for me as an investor in these stocks, the price metrics are really the ones that I care about most. But in the medium to long term, and I don't know what these timeframes are, how you measure them in months or years or whatever it is, in the long term, I think that strategy will outperform those other stocks. And I think that the size does matter. And so, if you want to trade in and out of one for the other, if you can time that right, that's great. I don't know that I can. I will feel a little bit dumb and foolish probably if I do move things out. So I try to be a one-way buyer. I buy in, I hold it, I hodl it forever, and I hopefully get that price appreciation. And if I have new money going in, which I do because I have a job that pays me, I have a side business that also pays me, then I can decide how to allocate that capital best. Shout out to Jeff and Ryan for this video and all the things that they put out into the community. There again, one last shout out that we didn't really get to when I was talking to Blake earlier and others, but talking about BTC Torque. So after I got home, I was thinking that, number one, Adam is just pure, signal. He's on fire with his videos and a lot of his analysis. But Sailors talked about this BTC torque and sort of the levers that they're pulling and how the preferreds are, giving more BTC torque for, what they're doing with the capital stack at strategy. And this is another factor that I feel like has to be brought in to the decision making for how you're going to allocate capital. Yes, there's some exciting news coming out of MetaPlanet today for how they're going to do their warrants in the future, I think at a premium. Again, I'll break that down probably in a different video, but BTC Torque is another one that I just want to incorporate into the modeling, into these factors there, as well as torque adjusted BTC yield, which I think is again something that Adam came up with himself. The Bitcoin per share growth divided by the MNAV multiple there, and telling you how efficiently a company is compounding the hard money and putting numbers to all of these things, trying to explain them in plain English, not just by regurgitating other people's words, but trying to make analogies or things to really show that I understand this, that I can explain it to someone else, and then see where I think that the best allocation will be. And the last thing that I'll kind of bring up that Blake brought up was the Kelly criterion for, trying to figure out your sequence of bets for long-term expected value and all of those things. I'm familiar with this as a strategy. I'm not familiar with this as a specific use. I've never tried to apply it, but this is also something that I think would be interesting because, as I just looked at this on Wikipedia, when you're finding the optimum bet in terms of what you're wagering and the growth rates and all of those things, it's probably not a 100% one, 100% the other decision that you're making, especially where we have multiple companies and each one of these I'm invested in. The only one that I don't have a significant exposure to is Cooler. But that could change in the future as well. I just see them as not following the strategy quite as heavily as these other companies. And I have different reasons for wanting to be in SMLR and the Smarter Web company that I don't necessarily have for being in Cooler. I'll probably share that in a different video in the future. But just wanted to kind of say that these are the things on my mind. The very, very last thing, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes as well, a link to all these things, is that I was listening to a video with Alexandra from the blockchain group, and he mentioned that Tobam, which is a French, I think, private equity group or a French investment group, but they wrote a mathematical paper about sort of strategies performance based on the metrics of BTC yield, I think BTC premium, and maybe MNAV was the third metric. So I want to go back and read this particular paper as well, as I'm kind of thinking about all these metrics and how they kind of come together. And then also see how we can apply these different things to all of these different companies in comparison to see sort of how to do the best job here. So it's open. Once you put your email address in, you can get it from SSRN. Thank you, SSRN, for making it available. I think that's everything that I have to share with you all. I thank everyone who has joined or watched these videos. I appreciate each and every one of you. Hopefully you're getting some value out of them, and certainly all those others that I shared their names of on this video today. Thank you for what you're putting out into the community as well. And with that, I wish you all a great day.